1162 versus estimates of 1016. So I know what you're going to say, Corey, so just say it.
What? It's a big profit, great big quarter, best quarter the company ever had.
I thought you were going to tell me how wrong the analysts were.
They were.
But that's,
you know what?
that's you know what? Oh, wow, they were wrong. But that big beat there, 1162
I want to see the rest of the numbers, but
what do you think? Initial reaction?
A little surprised at the bottom line. I want to see the rest. I want to see the rest of the units, but definitely better on the bottom line. We've got to see everything else shook out
and
here.
The big change here is the buyback program is going to go from 60 billion to 90 billion. So clearly, you know,
they're listening to Icahn to some degree.
Carl Icahn's tiny little stake in loud voice.
This is Carl Icahn's voice actually getting listened to.
Yeah, well,
Paul
Kedrosky is joining us as well from the West Coast. He's was an early stage venture investor, is an early stage venture investor, and Bloomberg contributing editor. Here we go. Apple saying it sees a 7-for-1 stock split. It's boosting its buyback to $90 billion. I mean, $10 billion short of what Carl Icahn was asking for. Your reaction to this, Paul?
Yeah, they're pushing every button and turning every dial they can. You know, this is financial engineering, of course. It doesn't have a lot to do with the core business, but nevertheless, it's the kind of stuff you do whenever you don't have products, new products to talk about. And kudos to them for doing it because they're under a lot of pressure to do exactly this kind of thing. I think the real question is, I think Cory or maybe it was Brian earlier was mentioning is, what are the numbers going to look like? The blended margins were, a little higher than people were expecting, and I think that's important. And the bottom line looked a little better, but seeing the actual units will be important here.
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Story to tell.
I agree. This is actually going to be significant. They're reporting a gross margin of 39%, 39.3%. This is a big deal. About 18 months ago, Apple started to see a decline in their gross margins, and what the company said at the time was that all of their new products were at the top of the cost curve. Well, here we are about 18 months later, and now they're seeing the benefit of a lot of the products actually seeing, they're cheaper to build now. If you take a look at, the cost of building the iPhone, the components inside, the cost of building the iPad, those are a lot cheaper now, and Apple's seeing a margin benefit moving towards 40%. This is a big surprise. This is going to be a real positive tomorrow.
It also goes a long way towards management credibility, too, because they said this was going to happen. They said, don't worry, the margin hit we're taking is temporary, not long-term. And now you see
evidence of it.
Margins.
That's right.
And I think this is also showing us is a philosophical choice by Apple to really, they want to be where the profits are, not where the most revenues and the least profits are, which is where you see Xiaomi and HTC and Samsung sort of going after market size, but not market profit.
And this is a Tim Cook kind of business, right? I mean, these are the dials that Tim Cook likes to turn. If he tells you he's going to improve margins, that's because he's got 20 years of improving margins. If he tells you he's going to launch a groundbreaking new product, I'd say, well, yeah, maybe, maybe not. But when he tells you he's going to do something on the margin front, well, that's what he's done for decades inside of Apple.
Agreed. And what's critical here is that this is a stock that I think has been largely ignored by investors for the last year or so. And this is the kind of thing that I think is going to help shift investor sentiment. Margins are something they've been beat up on. Now it's going to be a question of what can the company do between the month of June and the month of November when they have their Worldwide Developer Conference and we see what they're doing on the operating system side, is there new hardware, and then what do we see in the fall with the large screen iPhone 6? What is this wearable that we all believe is coming? But this is a great start to kick off that period from June to November where I think Apple really has an opportunity to shift investor sentiment and get people back into the name, a name that is largely under-owned across the investor base around the globe.
It's interesting stuff, and I think that we'll wait and see what we see about new products too. I mean, it is going to be a key driver. But as I mentioned earlier, the company has gotten to be so huge. I mean, here we are, second quarter. You're seeing $46 billion in revenues. I mean, when they launched the iPad, the company was doing $15 billion in quarterly revenues. Yeah. So it's including iPad.
Have we seen the actual? Have we seen the actual unit numbers? I didn't see them earlier. Did they beat the 37.7 on the iPads?
Yeah, I'm looking for that right now. Funny you should mention that, Paul. But so they sold 16.4 billion iPads.
Which
the iPhone was 43.7.
So the iPhone is better than expected. A lot of people, including myself, expected a number in the high 30s. So that's actually quite a bit better on the iPhone side. The iPad is a bit lower. The Street was closer to 20 million on the iPad.
The iPad sounds light. Yeah.
So this is going to be light for iPad, better for iPhone. What's interesting is we have seen a number of promotional programs.
We kind of expected this, right?
Well, we expected to a degree, but this is actually much better on iPhone than really everybody thought.
So that's some good news. But I mean, these sales have been pretty much soft. On the iPad front, nobody was expecting really great things. Everybody keeps saying you need to wait until there's a product.
That's fair, but it's still a miss. It's still a miss, and I think it's going to be a mixed read tomorrow. But the good news is that better iPhones worse on the iPad side, but this gross margin thing is a great indicator of what's to come. I think investors are going to pour into this name tomorrow and own it because we're ahead of a significant product cycle that, like I said, is going to start in June. We could get a new payment platform announced. We're going to definitely see some new hardware on the Mac side, new iPhones and iPads in the fall, a wearable in the fall. So tomorrow, I think investors come back to Apple starting tomorrow.
And what it suggests is that the sales of the iPhone were of the higher-end iPhone because the margins are so much higher for the overall business, and that maybe
Actually, Cory, it's actually mixed because the iPhone 5C is effectively it's a pretty cheap phone to build. Those are the same parts.
Right.
Those are the same parts from the iPhone 4, and they still charge a premium price for it. So I actually think that this gross margin benefit is coming from the iPhone 5, as well as the 5C. So I actually think it's a healthy mix.
I got to say, this is just unbelievable. The $90 million worth of buyback. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, huge.
It's a significant bump up. And you know what's funny? I didn't believe that Carl Icahn was going to have much of an impact here. And this is evidence that he wasn't the only one who was asking for a bigger buyback, but he was the most vocal one. And I'll be interested to hear what his response is to this tomorrow because this is definitely a better use of cash.
Yeah, and of course, just to clarify that, billion. I mean, it's just in a massive amount. He was calling for $100 billion.
Yeah.
He's pretty much got it.
We
thought that we thought that he was backing away from this. He thought that he just couldn't win this, but it seems like, and
but
Paul,
even
your point,
to be fair, though,
they needed to do it, right? Like people need to be excited about this stock. There's really no reason to get that excited without the new product. Unless you get a buyback.
I mean, this is the problem. They've had this air pocket of new products that's been probably one of the longest in the company's recent history with respect to sort of non-iterative releases. Yeah, it's incredible. And so, you had to do this kind of stuff, and you can expect now that, activists like Icahn are emboldened. He's not going to be the last one pounding on their door if the products this fall don't light a growth fire under the stock. This is going to continue because Cook has essentially shown that he's willing to fold on these things, and if that's a button he has to press to support the stock, he'll press that button.
And if you line up all the key 5 things that investors care about in this name, 4 of them are a positive. The iPhone's a positive. This buyback is going to be a significant positive to especially a lot of the longer-term investors who want to hold Apple over a 5-year period. This is going to be a real positive. The gross margin story, I can't emphasize enough how meaningful this is to see margins ticking back towards that 40% range where they were for a long time. 36%, 37%, that's not acceptable to a lot of investors. So investors are going to ride this momentum tomorrow, and this is actually going to be interesting to watch how this stock performs from tomorrow all the way through November. But I think this is going to mark a change. We're going to see a lot of positive commentary from analysts tomorrow, and it's going to be an interesting one to watch.
Can I give you a big picture number from Cory's model, which means the numbers are probably right? iPhone units cumulative. So since they introduced the iPhone, they have sold 516 million iPhones and 212 million iPads. It's just
amazing.
Amazing, which has decimated the notebook market.
Well, you've been positive on this stock. I got to say, you've been very positive all along, despite the sort of chorus of naysayers.
Right.
So, do you feel somewhat vindicated at all?
I do, but at the same time, this iPhone number is even better than I thought. I actually have thought that the iPhone number was going to be a bit muted because the iPhone 5C really hasn't sold that well. It hasn't sold that well in a lot of markets. But what this shows is the iPhone, the 5S, the newest model, is still doing well. And the iPhone 5C may be doing better, and some of these new programs they've initiated in the last quarter where they're offering different types of rebates and lower price points, it's worked. So I have been surprised because I was a little bit muted about the March quarter, what this would end up looking like, but bullish on the rest of the year. And what's great is that I think that's going to be the right call going forward, and I'm anxious to see how the market reacts.
Okay.